everyone. It's great to be back with you. I thoroughly enjoyed getting a chance last week with Brian preaching, and I know what's going on behind the scenes now. I was able to take a weekend over to Sioux Falls, and I went and checked out two different services where I had no responsibilities, which was just a nice break going into the new year, and it was awesome to see. I mean, I knew this was going to happen, but Brian did just an amazing job. It's great to be able to take a weekend away and know things that are going to be covered so well. But all that is to say is I'm just so excited to be back and gathered with you here this morning. And today, what I'd like to do is we're now in the third week of this Staying in Love series. I'd like to resolve a mystery that maybe some of you have wrestled with. I know I have, especially as I've been a pastor longer. And I've been there at the beginning when a couple is in love. And I've helped them stand before God, stand before friends, stand before family, and you can tell they're absolutely smitten with each other. And they will say and they will mean, I am committed to you forever. I was made for you, you are made for me, God's in this till death do us part. And then you go 5 years down the road or maybe a little bit further, and now these two people hate each other more than they hate anybody else on the planet. Like, what is up with that? And how does that happen? I think what we talk about today is going to answer that question a little bit. But just remember that the premise of this whole series is that, the question we wrestle with is it possible for two people to fall in love and then stay in love forever? And the truth is, even if I told you, no, I don't think you can. I don't think it's possible. Even if I told you that, you wouldn't believe me. You would still cling to that hope. Deep, deep down, you would still believe that out there somewhere is that special someone where if you could find each other, you will fall in love and you will stay in love despite the baggage, despite what the cynics say, and there's nothing I could do that could change that. Because like I said, that's hardwired into us. We believe not only is it possible, but it is possible for us. I think that's part of what it means to be made in the image of God. We just sang and celebrated that God is the blessed Trinity, right? Three and yet one. And being made in God's image, we get to play that out on a smaller scale through marriage in two becoming one. There's something unique about that level of intimacy that makes us want to say, you know what, hunting buddies are great and girlfriends are great. And yet I believe that there is that someone out there that I could come together with and do life with and go through life with and finish the race with. It's in us. But what we've learned so far is that for that to happen, and this is from the teachings of Jesus, for that to happen, first, you can't treat love like a noun, like something that happens to you, like something you fall into. I think of a swimming pool. No. To stay in love, you have to treat love like a verb. It's not something you fall into. It's not a swimming pool. It's swimming. It's something that you do. And remember that in a long-term romantic relationship, that love feeling, that becomes the caboose. What the engine is are those daily, practical, tangible acts of love. That's the engine. Now, we talked about that the first week. And then last week, Pastor Brian led us through Philippians chapter 2. And it was all about learning to love as Christ loved us. And remember that Christ did not wait to love us until we were lovable. He loved us even when we didn't deserve it. And He took the initiative. He submitted to our need. He set aside His rights and privileges as the Son of God, left heaven, and He came to our rescue. And that's a model for us. And Paul also puts it this way: look not only to your own interests, but to the interests of others. No better place to start with that than in our marriages. I also have to confess that so it was about a month and a half ago where I was doing the prep work for this series, and where we were parked on that Philippians 2 passage. And the moment that I came across that scripture, looking not only to your own interests, but the interests of others, God absolutely nailed me. And as a direct result of that time, we now have a dog in our house. Yeah, that had been an ongoing debate between Michelle and I, and my motives, well, anyway, God just hit me upside the head and said, you idiot, get her a dog. So we got her a dog, and we were able to surprise her with that. But that's also why I handed that sermon off to Brian, because God had messed with me enough through that Bible passage, so I tapped out. Not really, but Brian did a great job with that. Again, it's about learning to love the way that Christ loves us. Not the way that culture teaches us to love. Not the way that maybe even our parents taught us to love, but the way Jesus taught us to love. And now we're a couple weeks into this, and we're past that inspiration moment. I know some of you that first week, you dared to believe again. You dared to hope that, you know what, maybe we can heal our marriage. Maybe we can recapture that loving feeling. And now we're a few weeks into this, and you realize, oh, but this is hard. Well, I would agree that it is not easy. And yet I would still maintain that it is simple. And it would be simple if, we could go into this relationship and I love you, you love me, I put your needs first, you put my needs first, we just take care of each other that way. That would be simple, right? And we would stay in love forever, and we would hold hands, and we would giggle like 16-year-olds. That would be very simple and even easy if we came into the relationship with hearts that were very, very full and hearts that were very, very healthy. Again, if we both came into this, including our spouse, and we had nothing but awesome and amazing and wonderful relationships in our past. Dad was at every game, and Mom was at every recital, and they loved each other, and they held hands, and they giggled like they were 16-year-olds. And no one betrayed us, no one abused us, no one took advantage of us, no one mistreated us, and our backgrounds were full of nothing but affirmation and acceptance and joy. Like if we both came into a relationship like that, it would be easy for me to put her first and her to put me first. But the truth is that we normally don't do that. That's not what usually happens. Typically, both come into a relationship dinged up a bit relationally. Both come in carrying some scars. We all come into the marriage relationship with baggage, right? So we all bring stuff into the marriage. Okay, and so I want to illustrate this in a way that I think will be helpful to us. And so I've asked two of my good friends, I've asked Mr. Mugg and Mrs. Mugg to join us this morning. Now, Mr. Mugg and Mrs. Mugg, they fell in love a while ago. They fell in love once they were out of college. Right? And Mr. Mugg saw her and he's like, whoo, all right? And Mrs. Mugg saw him like, oh, wow, he's got the degree, he's got the job, he's going places, and just look at her, right? She's got all this going on for her. So they fell in love, and they started dating. And at the beginning, they were so careful because he was trying to win her heart, and she was trying to secure his affection. And they had a few bumps in the road, but they were minor, and they were so careful. And so they were so confident going into that marriage, it's going to be just fine. But then they got married. Some of you know what I'm talking about. They get a few months down the road, and they hit a challenge. They hit a snag. They hit a bump in the road. Whoa, hey, and that happens. Where did that come from? And he looks at her like, I never saw that while we were dating. What's going on? And she's like, I didn't know that you had anger issues. And it happens again. And he's like, well, I didn't have anger issues until you started bumping me. It happens again. And then she goes off, right, and she talks to her sister about what's going on, and she's got this going on, and she never saw that in him before, all right? And so then he goes, I don't know, where do guys go, when they run into challenges like this? He just goes somewhere, and he thinks. He just sits and he thinks, and he's looking back like, man, again, I didn't see this coming. I didn't see this in her while we dated, man. But she makes me so, she has some issues. What's up with that? Now, okay, just full disclosure, because even if you don't learn anything, I'm having fun up here. This is like therapy for me, right? Michelle and I dated for 4.5 years before we got married. We started dating when I was a sophomore in high school, and we did not have a serious single argument at all until we were married. We were careful. Plus, I think just in general, we're pretty reasonable, easygoing people. I grew up in a home where the message was, if you love each other, you'll never fight. All right? So, again, we were careful, and there was no spillage that went on until we were married. 3 months later, we are screaming at each other. I can't believe they didn't call the police. And we're screaming over each other over what utensil is best to make scrambled eggs with. All right? Rubber fork or spatula? Michelle's mom used the rubber fork. My mom used the spatula, and then it turned into whose mom could make the best eggs, and then, And see, the thing is, the tendency is for Mr. Mugg to look at Mrs. Mugg and say, you know what, I wouldn't have this coming out of me if she didn't. And she's looking at Mr. Mugg going, you know what, I wouldn't have this coming out of me if he didn't. But the truth is, Mr. Mugg has blue beads coming out of him because the blue beads there were to start with. And she has pink beads coming out of her because the pink beads were there to start with. And then you add to this, there is something unique about the marriage relationship that brings these to the surface. I don't know if I fully understand it. I think part of it is proximity. Right? You are now with each other day in, day out, 24/7. More collisions are bound to happen. Some of it, I think, has to do with the unique vulnerability that comes with romantic relationships. Some of it comes with the pressure of permanence. Like, we said I do before we knew everything about the other person and before we knew what we were going to face in life. But now we're stuck. There's something about this relationship where after we say I do, it's easy to take the other for granted. Well, they have to love me, so then I don't have to be so careful. There's something about that dynamic that has the potential to both bring the best out of us and bring the worst out of it and bring what's inside of us up to the surface. But our tendency is to think that my blue beads coming out are her fault and my pink beads are coming out are his fault. But the truth is they're coming out because they are in there. So, what do we do? What do we do with that? Something else unique about the marriage relationship and why that dynamic plays itself out there is because in that relationship uniquely, you have two individuals striving to become one, two agendas trying to merge. And that's why I think, so you have the potential to hurt each other in unique ways, which is why I think you have two people who say I do and are smitten with each other can 5 years down the road end up hating each other more than anyone else on the planet. What do? We've got to do something most of us don't do. We have to learn to pay attention to what's going on inside of us. All right? We have to pay attention to what's going on in here. And so here's how the author of Proverbs put it. We're going to look at just one verse today. Now, if you want to unpack this a little bit further, Jesus expounds on this in Matthew chapter 15. But Solomon just gets right to the point. So we're going to look at Proverbs 4:23. Now remember, as you go to Proverbs, Solomon is regarded as perhaps the wisest guy who ever lived, right? He knows a lot of stuff, and God inspired him to write Proverbs. We have the book of Ecclesiastes in the Bible because of Solomon. We have the Song of Solomon in the Bible because of him. So he had a lot to say about a lot of things. But in Proverbs 4:23, he says something that even out of the gate should get our attention. He says, above all else, all right? Above everything else I've ever written, and guys, God's inspired me to write a lot of stuff, but what I'm about to tell you is more important than anything else I've said before. Again, a mouthful to come from Solomon. Because in the book of Proverbs, he talks about money, he talks about sex, he talks about finances, he talks about work, he talks about friendship. In the Song of Solomon, he talks about erotic love and sex within inside of marriage. In Ecclesiastes, that's written towards the end of his life when he's looking back over a life where he tried everything this world has to offer. So he has a lot to say about a lot of things, and yet here he says, above all else, and that should get our attention. Okay, what is so important that we should pay attention above all else? He says, above all else, guard your heart. Okay? If you're going to get just one thing I ever say, get this, guard your heart, which means you pay attention to what's going on the inside. See, in that culture, the heart represented the seat of emotions. Emotions flowed from that point. So Solomon says, I want you to guard it. Pay attention to it. Guard it, which means keep close watch out, which means keep the bad guys out. Guard it, which means protect what's valuable. He says, I want you to guard your heart. I want you to protect and defend your heart. Now, if I were to go down the rows and ask some of you, all right, what is your strategy for guarding your heart? I'm guessing most of you would say, well, I guess I've never really thought about that before. In fact, that seems kind of strange. That seems kind of touchy-feely, kind of psychobabble kind of stuff. And even for some of you who are like, yeah, no, I get what he means, and yeah, I mean, I do that, but I doubt many of you go about this in a way where it is the most important thing, right? Where it is above all else, I guard my heart, all right? But what you need to know is this, is what is inside of you comes out in the relationships most important to you. And nothing is more important than marriage, which, again, adds pressure to that relationship. And so marriage uniquely brings our stuff to the surface. And you may have blamed it on the other person, and you may have bailed on a previous relationship, only to discover that, you get into another relationship and, hey, I still got blue beads coming out of me. What gives? I still got pink beads coming out of me. Is it because you chose poorly again? No, it's because they were inside of you to begin with. You have some stuff going inside of your heart that you need to understand. And this is why you need to have a strategy for guarding your heart if you want to stay in love. Now, something that we're good at that comes very naturally for us, while we may not be good at guarding our heart, what we are really good at is monitoring our spouse's behavior. What our spouse does or doesn't do, or what our spouse says or doesn't say. All right? We're great at monitoring other people's behavior, but we're not so good at monitoring our hearts. And both are important in a marriage relationship, all right? Don't get me wrong about that. And yet, we don't really have control over our spouse's behavior. But what we do have control over is what's going on in our heart. And what we can influence is the status of our heart. The trouble is we go into the relationship, all right, and it tends to be very emotion-driven at the beginning, and it seems like whatever our loved one does, it emits these wonderful feelings inside of us, feelings of feeling attractive, feelings of feeling wanted, feelings of feeling pursued and competent, and all those things. But if we're not careful, then we become dependent on our loved one's behavior to make us feel those things, and no one can carry the weight of that. No one can carry the weight of that. No one should carry the weight of that. Our spouses should not, our sense of well-being in our heart should not be dependent on our spouses. That's some stuff that we need to take care of internally, and yet our tendency is to blame the other when we have stuff coming out of us that we don't like. All right, this is as old as the garden. If you want to go back and you want to read Genesis 3, where the fall happened, and both Adam and Eve sinned, both had stuff come up out of them. The tendency was to blame someone else. And Adam first pointed the finger at Eve. But here's the deal. Your ability to feel these things you want to feel, that in-love feeling, is determined by the condition of your heart. So your ability to feel on an ongoing basis, I feel attractive and treasured and I feel valuable, that is dependent on the condition of your heart, even more than on the behavior of your spouse. And it's such a challenge because, again, we all come into relationships with baggage. And if you grew up in a home where you never felt appreciated and you never felt valued and you never felt respected, and you come into a relationship with baggage and a deficit, and the tendency is to want the other to fill that up, as it all depends on them. And that short circuits things. Those ramped up expectations can't be met. The truth is, your ability to feel certain things is a reflection not just of your spouse's behavior, but even more so a reflection of your heart. And so your ability to stay in love has as much to do with you monitoring and taking care of your own heart as it does with what your spouse does. Like, no matter who you're with, your ability to enjoy, wow, and this is great, and I still love you, depends on what's going on here, which is independent of what your spouse does. And if this isn't right, no amount of your spouse getting it right can make up for it. And when the blue beads or the pink beads are coming out, we want to say, well, hey, you know what? If you'd quit doing this, or if you would just start saying this, then these beads wouldn't come out. But the truth is we brought that stuff with us into the relationship. Now listen to how Solomon ends this verse. He says, above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Like, everything is filtered through the condition of your heart. Everything you do in your relationship, everything you do romantically, everything you do from the moment you get up to the moment you go to bed flows from your heart. And Jesus says the very, very same thing. The religious leaders felt that we were contaminated or we were defiled by external things like dirty dishes. We tend to think that, no, we have bad stuff going on inside of us because of what our spouse does. Jesus says, no, that stuff flows from the heart, first and foremost. And so if your heart isn't in good shape, it's going to be almost impossible to maintain healthy relationships. Now, you have seen this in other people. I have no doubt. I've seen this, right? I've had friends that I've witnessed them going through marital conflict, right? And I see it, and then my buddy comes to me, and he's revved up, and he's like, yeah, you know what? I'm just so, because she, right? And I'm sure you felt the same thing. I'm looking at that, and I'm like, okay, like I understand why there's some going on, but I'm just, in my mind, I'm thinking that what she did on the scale of offensibility, I would maybe give that a 4. And dude, you're like treating this like a 9. Right? So there's this gap here between how you're seeing this and between what it really is. And I'm pretty sure that the reason there's a gap there isn't all your spouse's fault. I'm guessing some of this is on you. But I have to admit, a lot of times I've just chickened out, right? And they're telling me this, and I feign like I agree, like, oh, yeah, wow. I listen sympathetically. I don't outright say I agree, but I don't want to get beads on me. So like, oh, yeah. But, when we go talk to our spouse, like, yeah, they're having some issues over there. I got to tell you what, I think my buddy has some issues. I think some of this is on him. He's got some stuff he's got to get worked out that really has nothing to do with the conflict or what his spouse has done. It's very, very easy to see that in the lives of other people, but it's very, very hard to see that in ourselves. But the truth is that stuff, right, what's inside of us comes out of us regardless of who's with us. What's in us comes out of us regardless of who's with us. And that's why I've seen someone bail on this relationship thinking, you know what, the reason I have blue beads coming up is because of her. And once I get away from her and I get with someone else, then there won't be any issues. And they get down the road, and they're in this new relationship, and blue beads are coming up again. It's because what's in us will come out of us, regardless of who is with us. That's why it's so important, if you want to stay in love, to pay attention to monitor, to guard, take care of what's going on in your heart. And so today I want to give you an exercise that has been a game changer for Michelle and I. And thankfully, God brought someone across our path that kind of helped us figure this out, even while it wasn't in the midst of beads flying everywhere. All right, which really helps. I'm a big believer in advanced learning wherever I can get it. Right? I don't want to have to learn. I don't want to have to wait till there's crisis in order to learn some of these things. And this is probably going to be scary, especially for us guys. But this is key to us staying in love. And again, I get it if you're thinking, all right, guarding your heart, paying attention, getting in touch with what's, like, is that even Christian? This sounds spiritual, not Christian. No, this is absolutely part of what it means to mature as a believer. All right, so there's 2 parts to this. And the first part is this. You've heard it say, think before you speak. And that's what the first step is here. All right, when those beads are flying, before you say anything, stop and think. And you need to identify what it is that's going on inside of you. Guys, here's where we need to push ourselves a little bit, because we tend to have one default negative emotion. I'm frustrated. Right? Frustrated can mean anything and everything for us. And like, we don't know what else to say when there's negative emotions. I'm just frustrated. Well, why are you frustrated? I don't know, and it's frustrating when you ask me that. I'm just frustrated. Women tend to be a little bit better at this, and it's not because they're more emotional. Guys, we're every bit as emotional, and maybe we're even more emotional, which scares us. Women tend to be a little more emotionally intuitive and less afraid to figure out what's going on. So what I want to help us do today, whether you're male or female, I want us to maybe expand our emotional vocabulary a little bit. And I just chuckle saying that because I'm guessing some of you are looking for the exits right now. But we need to do that. I want to expand the emotional vocabulary a little bit. Here's something we're going to have on our website for you. Some of you remember a few years ago when a couple, Chris and Twyla Stanifer, came and led a marriage series for us, and they did a marriage retreat for us too. This was a sheet that she'd given me. She says, Dan, when you got beads flying with Michelle, all right, you got to go deeper than frustrated. Try to pinpoint, what is even that emotion under the emotion. And so this worksheet here really does have the gamut of, not as extreme emotion to like very extreme emotion. But when you put a specific word to it and you identify it exactly, it's very, very powerful. So the first part is to just stop and think about what it is you are feeling. And again, this is Christian. We're actually trying to apply Scripture here. So the first thing you need to do is you need to name your emotion. Name your emotion. When you hit that bump and the beads are flying, stop before you say anything and think about, okay, what is this that I'm feeling inside? Sometimes even just hitting pause can diffuse the situation a little bit, or at least keep it from escalating. But then you need to dial in what is going on inside of me. And this list will help you. There's a bunch of emotions here. Figure out what it is. You know what? I think I just feel, when I really think about it, I feel left out. Or I'm frustrated because I'm embarrassed. I'm mad. Well, okay, I know you're mad, but why are you mad? Yeah, I think I'm mad because I feel unappreciated. Every time you start talking about your brother-in-law, right, and talking about the trips that they're able to take and the things they're able to do and the things they're able to buy, and you like and share their posts on Facebook, right, that causes the beads to well up in me, right, and when I stop and think about it, right, I know it's just that you love your brother, right, and I know you think I don't like him, but I really do. It's just that when I see that, I think I feel threatened. That's what it is. I think I feel less than in comparison. And that's what's going on inside of me. Get specific. I feel, honestly, incompetent. I feel lonely. I feel abandoned. Yeah, I know I'm frustrated, but the truth is I'm frustrated because this scares me. I feel helpless. I feel betrayed. That's what it is. I feel betrayed. And when we get in these arguments, I feel picked on or picked at or just prodded, crowded. To be honest, I think I'm jealous. Honey, deep down I love your sister, but when she shows up and she can wear those things that I can't wear, I know I'm critical of things, but I think maybe the reason I'm critical is because I'm jealous. Jealous. See, now we're getting somewhere. When we can get that specific and we can name it. I'm sure this all feels weird at first. I totally relate. It felt very, very weird to me, but something happens when you identify it. Feel disrespected when I think about it. We're getting somewhere. Because as long as it's unidentified, as long as it's secret, it runs your life in ways you don't recognize and that you don't understand. And it causes you to see things you shouldn't. Like, where did that come from? Or it keeps you from saying or doing the things that you should. I want to, but it's because you have these unidentified emotions running underneath the surface. But when you name them, it brings them to the surface. It exposes them, and the fog of war begins to clear. That's what begins to happen. Naming that emotion, identifying, even saying it out loud to yourself at first, helps you get the perspective you need. Sometimes it even helps you evaluate and recognize. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes it even helps you go, okay, all right. This has helped me and Michelle when the beads have been flying, because I know deep down Michelle is a kind, reasonable person. I know she loves me. And all right, we got this going on now, and I got these beads flying, but I doubt she's doing what she's doing just to get that going from me. Yep. All right, I know that she's not talking about her brother to make me feel, she's talking about her brother because she loves him, all right? And so this that's going on inside is maybe not even a her issue. Maybe this is a me issue. And I just spewed all over her. Maybe I owe her an apology. Your spouse's words and your spouse's actions, they're just bringing something to the surface that's already there. And I'm telling you, there is incredible freedom when you begin to discern the difference between your spouse's action and your emotion. oftentimes that gap that's there, it's not all on them. And in that gap, there is our choice. What we do with that is in that gap. And if we don't identify it, that emotion will run our lives, and it has a potential to drive a deeper and deeper wedge between us and the person we've committed to loving for the rest of our lives. But our tendency is to want to blame our junk on our spouse. And so you've got to name it. It's jealousy. And say it out loud to yourself. I feel neglected. I feel left out. And do that evaluation. And then once you've kind of gotten that figured out and you've sorted through these things, all right, some things you just taken care of right away. This is a me issue. But when you're finally at a good spot, then what you need to do is then you need to share that information with your spouse. And this is what this looks like then. All right, this is when Mr. Mugg comes to Mrs. Mugg and he just shares with her, you know what? I feel blank when blank. Okay? That's kind of the formula. I just need you to know I have this going on and this is what this is. I feel this when blank. And at this point, this is not an accusation. This is an observation. I feel blank when blank. Okay? This is not criticism. All right? This is information that's being shared. Hey, look, I just need you to know I'm feeling this right now when this. And now if that causes pink beads to come up, all right, you get all defensive and like, then there's some pink bead issues going on here. And when someone you love approaches you that way, look, I just need you to know that I feel this when this, the proper response of that is, thank you for telling me. Thank you for letting me know. And then zip it. Okay? Thank you for letting me know. Okay, let's say that together, all right? Thank you for letting me know. And then, all right? Not, well, you should have thicker skin and you should grow up and you should be stronger. No. Thank you for telling me. Pause. If you have to expound, say, you know what? Thank you. Thank you for pausing a moment, for looking inward instead of blaming me right away. Thank you for doing the courageous work of evaluating. Thank you even for being vulnerable enough to share that with me. But then, thank you for letting me know. And here's where the test comes. Okay, so a healthy person's response to that, if someone they love has approached them and they have not attacked them, but they've approached them and let them know, look, I just need you to know that I feel this when this. Then this person, if they're healthy, will go into evaluation mode. And if they know that there's something they're contributing that hurts the person they love, it causes hurt to well up in them, they make adjustments where they can. They make adjustments where they can. Now, at the very least, what gets demonstrated in this process is he's saying, look, I'm at least demonstrating that reconciling is more important than getting my way. Us getting back together on the same page and settling this down means more to me than being right. Now, the other thing about this process, so this process can be so powerful if your goal is staying in love. But as with any tool, the more powerful it is to do good, the more harm it can do when used in the wrong way. And so if you hijack this process to play a game, if you hijack this process to manipulate, take advantage of your sympathetic spouse, then not only does it not help, it will leave you worse off than you were before. But if your goal is to stay in love, this can be so powerful. The reason you have this stuff coming out of you is because you brought the stuff with you into the relationship. And we have to be aware. And that doesn't mean that our spouse is always right and that they don't do things that are wrong or hurtful. But we have to be aware of our tendency to want to blame our spouse for our junk and push through that. And we need to realize that oftentimes those beads are coming out because of something not healthy that's welling up from our heart. Your ability to stay in love has as much to do with the condition of your heart as it does the behavior of your partner. And I'm just guessing for a number of us here, there's some things that we got to take our eyes off our spouse and what they're doing, and we got to be willing to look inward and have the courage to face it and ask for God's help. God, help me get over this, because this really isn't about her. This really isn't about him. This is some stuff I've got to deal with. Once you've done that evaluation, once you've stopped and you've identified what it is going on inside of you, then at the right time you share that with your spouse. And again, at that point the ball is in their court, but at least you've demonstrated staying in love is more important than being right or getting your way. But all of that starts with what Solomon calls us to in Scripture. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. And he's exactly right. Guarding your heart is key to staying in love. That has nothing to do with your spouse. That has everything to do with you. So will you pray with me? Father, I know that this lands in a lot of different places for us. For some of us, this stirs up more than it settles. And this is a process that doesn't offer guarantees. Both have to be committed to the relationship. But Father, for some of us, this explains the family we grew up in. For some of us, this explains breakdown of a previous relationship. For some of us, this explains a live issue right now in our marriages. And so, God, I pray that you'd give us a new goal to shoot for. I pray our goal isn't changing our spouse's behavior. I pray our goal is first guarding our hearts. Help us understand. I think there's a reason David asked for your help on this. I don't know that there's any area where we have more blind spots than when it's to what's going on inside of us. So give us courage to respond the way you want us to respond to this. And I pray that we are men and women who, to the best of our ability, we've positioned ourselves not only to love you, but to love with a pure and clean and a whole and a healed heart the people that you've put in our lives and you've called us to love for the rest of our lives. And I pray this in Jesus' name, who shows us the way. Amen.